Hello again. Welcome back to Lost in Translation. My name is Nico, and today we are taking a look at the Torah portion of Yayechi, and especially at my top 10 list of things you will miss if you're only reading the Torah portion in English. So we'll start right away with number 1. Jacob asks to be buried with his fathers, right? So right at the very beginning, right, we have to remember that the last portion ends with, and Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, right? Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzraim be'eretz Goshen ve'achazu va'irbu meod, right? And he multiplied greatly. In the very next verse, which is the beginning of the next portion, Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim, right? So we've got this juxtaposition of the two names constantly, Jacob, Israel, right? And so now we're being told that Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. And this is how many years he lived, 147 in total. Okay? And so he's getting close to his time. He feels that he's coming close to death, and he asks Yosef to make a vow that you'll carry me out of Egypt and you'll bury me in their grave, in the grave of his forefathers, right? So Yaakov knows that maybe he knows that he'll be that there'll be a shrine to him in Egypt, that the Egyptians might, devote some sort of part of the religion to him, or something like this. Or maybe we just need to know that Yashar Kel can't be buried in Mitzrayim, in the limitation, right? He has to be taken back to his place, because he's ultimately, he's of a higher degree, and he can't be laid to rest in the lower degree. Great. So part number 2. The adoption and blessing of Ephraim and Manese. So in the very next chapter, right, Joseph comes to understand that his father is sick, and he brings his 2 sons, Manase and Ephraim. Manase is the oldest, Ephraim is the youngest, and they're brought to Jacob. And Jacob, as for your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt, until I came to you, or before I came to you, they're mine. He's adopting them. Remember, we talked about the significance of this before, that only Joseph, as a master of Egypt, could marry an Egyptian woman and have Egyptian children by her, and they're still eligible to be part of the nation of Israel. They're not separated like all the previous generations of Egyptian-born family members, right? They're part. Not only are they included in the family and in the nation of Israel, but they are elevated to the level of the 12 brothers, right? So Levi ends up losing. He doesn't lose his portion. Levi's portion is Hashem, right? This is where the priests and the ministers of the temple come from. Is from the tribe of Levites. So they don't of Levi. They don't get any portion in the land. And so in order to maintain these 12 portions in the land, well, Joseph is given a double portion in that his two sons are adopted, and each one of them becomes the head of a tribe, of a half tribe, right? Okay, so that in itself is very interesting. Now it continues that Joseph brings his sons to him. He brings his oldest son in his left hand so that Jacob could place his right hand on him easily for the primary blessing, because we bless with our right hands. And he brings his younger son in his right hand so that Jacob would place his left hand upon him. But Jacob doesn't do this. Yaakov Avinu switches his hands around and places his right hand on the younger, which is something that Joseph tries to correct here, right? And Jacob, his father, refuses. He says, "No, I know what I'm doing. Your elder son will become a people, and he will be great, but the younger son will be greater than he." And this is where we spoke about this before. This is where the blessing that we give on Shabbat night to our sons, that they should be that Ishmecha Elohim Ephraim Manese, right? That God, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manase. That these righteous souls were born out of the limitation of Egypt, from an Egyptian mother, from a father who was master of Egypt, and they still maintained their righteousness so much so that they could be included in that nation of Yashar Kel. Okay, so number 3. What will befall you in the end of days? So Yaakov Avinu, he gathers all his sons together because he knows the time is approaching. Right? He says, "Gather and listen, sons of Yaakov, and listen to Israel, your father." Again, the juxtaposition of the two names. Right? Gather, and I will tell you what will happen to you at the end of days. Well, this is interesting here, because what happens instead is Yaakov Avinu gives this litany. He gives a blessing to each of his sons. He doesn't tell him anything about the future, right? And that's distinctly what's being told here. He doesn't say, "Gather so that I can bless you." He says, "Let me tell you what's going to happen to you," right? And so maybe there are secrets in these blessings, but for some reason, Hashem stops his mouth. He may have had some sort of prophecy and permission wasn't given. He wasn't allowed to share this ultimate knowledge of what was going to happen in the end of days. And his mouth was stopped with the blessings. Okay, so let's take a quick look at some of these blessings here in particular. Number 4, we're going to take a look at the blessings of Judah and Joseph. Right, a lot of these blessings, or he's saying Simon and Levi are brothers, and the stolen instruments are their weapons, right? They killed the whole city of Shechem, right? And they're conspirators. And he's not going to be a part of that. But and he's showing the problems with the first 3 brothers, and that's when he gets to Judah. And at Judah, your brothers will acknowledge you. Right? Judah lost children. Judah took responsibility for Benjamin. Judah came to the forefront to be a leader, and the brothers will acknowledge him. and right, his hand will be at the nape of his enemies. The nape is the back of the neck, as if the enemy is running away from him and he's grabbing him from behind. Your father's sons will prostrate themselves to you. So kings, basically Judah is where the kings are going to come from, the legitimate crown. Yes. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the student of the law from between his feet. It's interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting translation here, because it can be confusing. In other translations, like in the Art Scroll, it could be read that the scepter won't leave Judah, and neither will a scholar until Shiloh comes. So maybe there's no scholars in Judah, but it doesn't seem like a congruent thing. So here, yeah, this is a much more true translation here. Umechokek mibein raglaiv. These are your legs. Ad ki yavo shilo velo ikhat amim. Right, and to him will be a gathering of peoples. Okay, so that's very interesting for Judah. If we skip down to Joseph, charming son is Joseph, right? The son charming to the eye, right? Women strode along to see him. They heaped bitterness upon him. So we're just kind of we're recounting what's happened to him. But his bow is strongly established. His arms are gilded from the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. So Hashem took care of Jacob. We know this. And now he's the shepherd to the rock of Israel, to the nation, to all his brothers. And yeah. And so he says, he will bless you with the blessings of heaven, of the heavens above, the blessings of the deep lying below, the blessings of father and mother. The blessings of your father surpasses the blessings of my parents, the ends of the everlasting hills. May they come to Joseph's head and to the crown of the one who was separated from his brothers, right? And this is interesting, because it can also be a blessing for all of us who are in exile, all of us who are separated from the nation, all of us who are outside of the land of Israel. And maybe this is also an extra blessing upon us for all eternity here. May it be so. Okay, number 5. Where I buried Leah. So up until this point, we never had an indication that Leah had died, right? And here at the very end of his blessings, he's telling them to bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephraim the Hittite. We're getting reminded of all of this in the field of Machpelah, right? There they buried Abraham and his wife Sarah. There they buried Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And there I buried Leah. So we know that Leah passed sometime in all of this. This is our first direct understanding that Leah had passed. But seems that she did not come down into into Egypt. None of the holy mothers were ever brought down into Egypt, at least not to stay. Sarah had a brief sojourn and her encounter with Pharaoh, but that was it. Okay, number 6. Joseph went up to bury his father. So Yaakov Avinu dies. Immediately after finishing his instructions, he pulls his legs up onto the bed and he expires. He is gathered unto his people. And Joseph has him embalmed because they're in Egypt, and it's what they do in Egypt. And it would have been strange not to do so. It's not a Jewish thing to do, however. And he tells Pharaoh of the promise that he made to his father, and Pharaoh allows Joseph to go up and bury his father. Now, there's a lot of interesting stuff here in right? Joseph goes up to bury his father. Joseph's entire house and his brothers and his father's household, only their young children and their flocks and cattle did they leave in the land of Goshen. This becomes interesting because in Shemot, Moses is insisting that no, we are leaving with our children, with our elderly, with our flocks and our cattle. We're all leaving on our 3-day journey into the wilderness. And here they're left behind, right? It's being made very clear that they are staying in Egypt, that they're coming back to Egypt. All right, number 7. Avel Mitzraim. Right? Here they go. This often doesn't happen very well in, say, the Art Scroll or other translations. Many times, place names don't get translated. They don't get translated. They get transliterated, and we don't know what Abel or Avel Mitzraim means, right? And here they're telling us right here, Egypt mourns. So that this place that they had come to on the other side of the Jordan, that the Egyptians demonstrated not just the Egyptians, the whole party, the 12 sons and the officers and all the people from Egypt that came, they all bewailed the passing of Yaakov Avinu. Yet another time that the inhabitants of the land called the place where that happened Avel Mitzraim, Egypt mourns. Number 8. The brothers themselves tell Yosef, we are ready to be your slaves. Yaakov Avinu, he's dead, he's buried. Now the brothers are worried that Yosef, who is now the master of Egypt still, might harbor some sort of resentment or hatred, and he might punish them, might hurt them. And they made a fib. They said that their fathers, gave instructions that Joseph should forgive them. And here, it says, here it's a much better translation. Vayamoru hinenu lecha la'avadim. Right? They are ready. Right here, we are your slaves, not your servants. See, in Hebrew, an eved, slave, servant, it's the same thing. It's difficult to there's not the nuance Ovid, Evid, maybe it depends on how you're vowelizing it. That's it. But the letters are the same because the quality is the same. The thing is here is that, interestingly enough, they're bowing down to the crown of Egypt and exclaiming that they're ready to be slaves. And this is precisely what happens to all of the house of Jacob and the nation of Israel. They are enslaved almost immediately after Joseph passes. So by committing themselves to the service of Joseph, they, all those in earshot, any of the Egyptians who are already there, they're going to expect, they've made themselves slaves to the crown of Egypt. So let's use them as slaves. Number 9, Joseph justifies his brothers again. Again, we see this quality of Joseph HaTzadik, right? Says, Vayomer Alehem Yosef El Tireu Ki Hatachat Elohim Ani, right? Don't be afraid for am I instead of God? Indeed, you intended evil against me, but God designed it for good, in order to bring about what is at present, to keep a great populace alive. So Joseph is always telling his brothers, be at peace. God did this. He did all of it. He used you. He's using me now. It's all part of his plan. And through this faith that Joseph has in the goodness of Hashem's actions in the past and his intentions for the future, Joseph can justify the whole world, not just this single poor action of his brothers in the past. When God will surely remember you, or indeed remember you. Joseph is about to die, and he's giving his brothers instructions to take his bones up out of Egypt, because he knows that ultimately his quality, he's tied to Isaac, he's tied to Abraham, he's tied to Israel, that his quality can't be left in Mitzrayim. And so when the nation of Israel comes out of Egypt, he's commanded, he's asked his brothers to take his bones up out with him. And in this request, he's telling him, God will surely remember you, right? And in Hebrew, it's interesting, we have a repetition of the same verb in slightly different tenses to give this certitude of what will happen, right? Anakimat ve'elekim pakod ifkod, right? Surely he will remember etchem, right? You. Ve'ela etchem min haaretz hazod el haaretz asher nishba'a la'Avraham le'itzhak u'li'Yaakov, right? That God will surely remember you. Well, this is prophetic, right? It's exactly the same language that the Redeemer, who is supposed to take the nation of Israel out of Egypt, this is the same language he's supposed to use when he addresses the elders of the nation. And we will see that this is precisely what we see used in the book of Exodus or Shemot, starting next week. Okay, and so there again is a lot going on here, and there's even something more that's so interesting. If we start now to observe the story, the life of Yosef, and compare it event for event to the story and the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, we start to see that the two characters are mirror images of each other. So think about that some over this next week, and we can go over some of those details hopefully in the next video when we start our journey into the book of Shemot. Thank you very much. Share with me in the comments, like and subscribe, and until next time, be well. Goodbye.